Hey guys, welcome back. So today I brought home this storm responder generator. This one was listed on Facebook Marketplace for only $50, and that's a steal. Usually I don't get these for less than $100, maybe $70 at best, and those are hopelessly broken, usually with a blown engine or a stator that's melted down. But not in this case. The listing didn't say too much other than the generator is not running, and it most likely needs a new starter solenoid. That said, this doesn't have one of those, but when I went to pick it up, the person selling it did kind of elaborate on what he meant, and that basically he thinks there's no spark. He pulled the plug out and tested it for spark and saw nothing. So, I did pull the engine over. It has compression, so I'm sure it is something simple. Let me get you set up a little bit better. We'll do some quick checks, and I just want to pull this over, see if we get anything from this engine. Yeah, it's a bit low. Not too bad, but you don't want to play around with these. These have no oil sensors. You want to make sure they're topped off. So I'll do that right now. We'll change the oil later once the engine has warmed up. Got plenty of fuel. And fuel valve is on. Okay, let's see what we get. Yeah, we get nothing. Okay, gonna check for spark with the spark tester. We've got spark. I know we have compression. I can feel it when pulling it over. Most likely timing's fine. So let me get the airbox off. I'm going to give it a quick squirt of starting fluid and see if this thing comes to life. Nice. It's almost always the fuel. So that carb probably needs to be cleaned. Let's get it off and take a look. Yeah, I expected more fuel to come out of that line. So let me just crack the valve, see if we have some flow issues. Nope, that's good. Fuel color doesn't look bad, but it is pretty hazy. That usually means water, so I'm just going to let it sit for a minute and see if any settles out. Yeah, ideally this gasket would come off, but it's pretty stuck down here. I'm going to try to save it, but I think I'm going to have to rip this one because the studs won't come out without tearing this gasket. Yeah, it's not too bad actually. The gasket on the airbox side doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. It's not going to cause a run issue. You just don't want anything kind of sneaking by the air filter. But, the gaskets on the other side, those do need to be pretty perfect. Yeah, that one put up a fight, but I think we saved it. It's still pretty hazy, but I do think I see some water down there. So I'll let this sit a bit longer, but I think we do have water in the tank. Anyway, let's crack this open. We'll drain the bowl and see what's going on in there. Yeah, not too bad. That'll clean up. You're not really seeing much here. I mean, the main jet is right in there. If I shine a light up, hopefully you can see, but that main jet is not clogged. The only issue I see here is this tube right here. It looks like it's full of junk, and that is a passage for fuel that goes up into the carb. So potentially that is the pilot circuit. I'm not sure on this one, but that needs to be fixed. Otherwise, it's just running through all the fuel and air openings and just making sure that there are no additional clogs. And then I'll soak this a bit in the ultrasonic and we should be good to go. That's the main jet. Looks like jelly. You need to make sure you take this off. If you're going to spray it with carb cleaner or even put it in the ultrasonic, the Harbor Freight super heavy duty degreaser I use tends to shrink these. And they have to be the right size or else it's never going to run right. And then there's one more here on the fuel inlet that needs to come off. And I think it's ready for a bath. It's been about 15 minutes. The fuel is nice and clear. You can see to the bottom. And if you look closely, you'll see there's a line going across on the bottom right about there. And that is water. A decent amount of water. So getting that in here is going to cause rust. And if you get enough to get to the level of the main jet, it's not going to run at all. And that's what we were seeing. So most likely it was just water causing this issue. And to some extent, whatever this jelly was in here. But, that's really it. So tank has to be drained, carb has to be cleaned, and this thing should run like new. Okay, it's all cleaned up. Not that it was that bad to begin with. Now there is corrosion on here, and the degreaser's not going to take that off, but that shouldn't affect how it runs. So I'm just going to get this back together, put it back on the machine, and probably drain the tank. I want to get the water out of it. When you put this jet back in, make sure the smaller diameter end with the O-ring goes down. And it does turn sideways on the way down, so you might have to try a few times to get it the way that it should be. Yeah, like that. And it's important to make sure this gasket lines up with all the marks here. On some of these carbs, they actually etch this side, and that's where you put this gasket and then you put it together. But I think the more recent models, they did it on the plastic side. And I'm just going to use a little bit of WD-40 on this O-ring right here. Sometimes they are a bit difficult to get it to seat properly into the carb. So usually I check the function of the needle and seat at this point, but with the Nikki carb, you really can't do that. You do need to put this piece on, which holds everything down and tight, and then you can do that test. A lot of Nikkis too have a spring right here, which helps hold this piece tight, but this is one of the ones that does not have that spring. I'm not really sure why, but some do and some don't. All right, I'm going to test the function of the needle and seat. In this position, you should hear the air coming out, and then when you turn it upside down, it should stop. If you hear anything, then it's going to leak. Okay, good. That'll work. So now I have to get the fuel out of the tank. I'm sure there's water in the tank. The fuel itself doesn't smell bad, so I'm going to catch the fuel in these clear bottles. Water's heavier than gas, so it should go to the bottom. I'll pour the gas off into this tank here on the left, and then the bad stuff at the bottom will just go into a separate tank to recycle. Not as much fuel came out of the tank as I thought. This is a 7-gallon tank. Thankfully, it was not full. And there's not a ton of water that came out. I mean, this is the first bottle. You can see there's a bit down there. The second one looks pretty good. And the third one, there's a bit down there. So most of this fuel can be reused. The stuff that's on the bottom is the only stuff that needs to be discarded here. As far as the tank goes, there is still some in there, so it does need to be, the tank needs to be tilted. We'll get the last bit out as much as we can, and then it has to be mopped completely dry. Okay, the tank's all dry, and I think I'm going to leave it that way. These tanks, plastic tanks, are hard to drain and get them completely dry without mopping up what's left. And there's a couple reasons for that. Actually, most plastic tanks suffer from this problem. There's this rubber bushing right here, and that goes into the tank and creates a dam basically about of 1/4 of an inch. So that little last bit of fuel can't come out. And the other issue is this tank, the way it's shaped, these areas kind of trap fuel, and it just doesn't come out on its own unless you tip it and dry it out. So now that it's dry, I'm going to leave it that way. We'll just test with the test tank and not have to go through this again. Okay, I'm losing daylight again, but I managed to get out before the sun's completely down. So I'm going to get this thing hopefully started. Just make sure it runs right and makes power. Okay, good. No surprises. The engine started right up. It sounds good. And the generator head makes power and could handle the 3,000 watt load without issue. So, really, there's nothing major wrong with this. It was just a dirty carb. And I think at this point, I'm just going to get it inside. When I get that oil changed, it was pretty dirty. And then we'll pretty this thing up a bit and call it at that point. Thought I was in the home stretch, and I am for the most part, but you guys probably already spotted it. When this thing powered up, it threw a pretty good sized spark out of here. And I think that was just magnified by the fact that the sun had just set. So the light from this really lit up the ground. And it didn't seem to cause any power problems, but I think it would be prudent to just pull this off, inspect the brushes and everything else, make sure there's nothing going on in there that shouldn't be. That might be the problem. If you look at the blue wire, the connector looks like it's charred. Could be dust, but I don't think so. If you look at the red wire, there's no discoloration, no dust. So let's get the brushes out, get a closer look at that blue wire. Ooh. Yeah, that's the problem. This diode, sorry, not a diode, this capacitor is cooked. So I'm guessing this is what kind of puked its brains out and discolored that. And that the wire itself is probably fine. So unfortunately this is bad. I do have a few extras, but I think most of the ones I have are bad. So let me get them out, take a quick look, maybe I can find a good one. Okay, I came up with a few options. Well, really only one. This one is missing a diode, can't use it, but it has a good capacitor. This one has all its diodes, but one of them is bad, so can't use that either. The one I have left, I believe is in good condition, but I haven't used it because the brushes are worn a bit more than the others. So this was kind of my last choice, but given the options, I think that's what we have to go with. And just for comparison, you can see how much meat is left here versus the ones on the right. So this still will last quite a while. I don't actually know how many hours a set of brushes will last, but these brushes are a lot wider than most other generators. They will last quite a bit longer. And make sure the tab side goes in or else it won't power up. Don't over torque these. They strip out really easily. I usually don't even use a wrench when tightening them, but if you do use a wrench, be pretty easy on them. That was easy. And pretty much every one of these generators I pick up, this cover looks like this. It's, I'm guessing it's some sort of a coating they put on there. It just comes off as these things age and sit in the sun. There's a few things that can get this off pretty easily. I think alcohol being probably one of the easiest and most available that I have. So I did put a little bit of alcohol here and just rubbed it, and you can see the difference. So I'm just going to do that to the rest of this, and we'll finish up with the muffler. So because the exhaust is chrome, you can clean it up just like a chrome bumper. Usually WD-40 and Scotch-Brite or steel wool works pretty well. In this case, I'm not going to use WD-40 because, this is the exhaust system. It's just going to bake off the oil. I don't think it's going to provide much of a benefit. So I usually just use some water and Scotch-Brite, and this stuff comes right off. It will come back eventually, but this will keep it looking nice for quite a while. When it comes back, you can just do it again. It didn't clean up as well as I was hoping, but it is quite a bit better than doing nothing. Gonna give this a quick try. I want to make sure that that set of brushes and the bridge rectifier I put on there does in fact work. We got power, 132 and a half, 61.5. That's good. So I think I'm pretty much done with this one. It wasn't too difficult, pretty typical story. Someone neglected it a bit. The fuel went bad in the carburetor, creating that jelly clogging things up, and water got into the fuel. So either one of those things would have kept this from running, but it's running well now. It's making power, and we had a little excitement. I've never had a bridge rectifier blow out on one of these, but this one did. So luckily I had an extra set and it's working fine. So I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.